Winterflow. First letter to Marlia on the long trains. 1:10. Marlia, I've never understood you. How consistently you abandon your defenses, safest strongholds, strategic positions, supply trains, armor, logistics, and all. Like Georg Trakl, my poet of the century, before the carnage at Grodeck in 1914. I saw you today with only your fifes and a few ragged pennons rise from your bed in the infirmary and walk out into the field. It rang a bell. I thought, whatever moved this is rare, priceless because costly, without returns. But this is what matters to me. The rest of what passes for speech is mostly inertia, coasting downhill smoothly after having mounted on others' steam. But what moves and persists from the heart drives the rest of us also, and those others whose supply lines may be stretched too far, because they labor in remotest fields, in the most improbable reaches of outlying life, where once they were transported from what they were and cannot return. But maybe they'll slake their thirst for a moment when they need it most and be restored, together with the powers which conveyed them there, maybe once only, and far from here, or very near. But we must find the reservoirs, the collecting points, to pool those powers and preserve them, for when the long trains pass through, on their way into the desert. Now I'd return, dear Marlia, some portion of the fierce distress laid bare in your letter. I dream of being severed, cut loose and floating down into the dark like a maple wing, spiraling out of the sun. But the core, the seed inside, wants out of its husk. It's like working on a stone bridge made of stalactites, condensing drop by drop out of dreams, out of the work done, out of the tears of the fragile beings I've caused to suffer. There is no stopping place, no turning point, no return. I'm way out over it now, and the fall is endless. But maybe the trains will pass over, with all their transports, through link on link, word on word, that bear the vibrations, the massive connections, the recollections in chains, the long supply lines trickling out of dreams into the desert, that will not stop for me. Path of the Preacher, 1:11. Squatting on the doorsill, resting her lung, Beulah lights up, takes a long drag, and breathes long. Course, times could be worse. I've knowed a few. Now, when this new little preacher come into the country, called Preacher Fudge, he was riding up into the hills one day to convert Emmer. Since Emmer was from far away Atlanta, he was considered a heathen. Emmer was a moonshine until they broke him up. They run him clean out of there. Then he come back. He kept a slipping back in and going in deeper, way back into the mountain, behind the luster field. This Emmer, he had a wide, pudgy nose and a broad face, with thick lips pouting and curling out, and one eye looking in wrong toward the tip of his nose. His coloring was very brown. His forehead protruded way out, and his hairline started at the top of his head. He come from Atlanta. He was a short feller, and he walked out wide this-a-way and that-a-way. He just paddled. If you started to agree with him, he'd waddle with it. He'd turn it wrong. He'd turn it around and turn around with it, till he was arguing with himself. Everything in the world you'd mention, he knowed about it anyway. Till Emmer he got right tiresome, so people commenced to shun him. So he'd run with Silas. Silas would say uh-huh to anybody. Now this new little preacher, this preacher Fudge, come a-riding his mule up the road past Elam Jackson's, up toward the luster field, to save this Emmer's soul. And there he found them, the both of them, throwing mud balls, having a pitched battle around the bend where the clay was thick. Silas was crafty. He had his made up. He was cradling them, like rocking his babies and letting them fly. But Emmer was on his knees, all prayerful, making his up as he went, scooping and dodging and wiping his face. So there they were, and there the preacher found them, yelling and complaining and pounding one another. Yes, sir, don't you know, right now? Here come this preacher Fudge on his mule. That little fat mule a-suffering so under that fat little preacher. Up the hill, climbing slow around the bend. Hit, all at once, right and left, up and down, catching on both sides. As thick as flies swarming on a steer's nose before they saw him, and he them. And they kept on a minute, two. They caught him good before they skedaddled back down to Emmer's Still. Meanwhile, way down in the holler, Essie's a-waiting. All 300 pounds of her. Oh, she was a-courting him. Right strong those days, Essie was. That poor little fat preacher Fudge, all splattered up with mud balls, dejected as he was after all his efforts to save poor Emmer's soul. But I really don't know if she was waiting. Essie and them girls would be all over that mountain. No, I couldn't say for sure. I don't know where they'd be. Maybe they'd have their spoons and be down the hill sapping. The chestnut'll hold a good sap. The inside of the bark would be easy to come off. It'd cup and you'd just come up the bark with it. You'd strip it off and scrape it down with a spoon. It'd be so full of sap, sticky, sweet, and syrupy, like maples. But it might have been later, when they'd go after the oak balls. You'd eat the inside of them, but the little fuzzy outside, you'd suck that and throw it away. Oh, but the honeysuckle apples, Essie knowed when they'd come on. They're a bulky thing, so full of water, all green and glassy looking, like jello. And they have a little white frost on them. That's when they're the best. I don't know what more she could have wanted from that poor little fat preacher Fudge, with him and his mule turned back from saving Emmer, trudging back down the mountain all bespattered and caked. And it'd be drying now into a thin crispness, cracking up when he opens his mouth, like the chocolate on a fudgesicle when you bite into it. The laughter flushed under the red hair plays over the bony skull, the memory shell hatching. One preacher, small, chubby, and delectable. launched lonesome on his mission, on his mule, leaving his lady in the valley and all temptation, riding up into the hills with the hosts of the Lord. Flo smiles. Beulah draws long, breathes, savors, opens her palm, and examines her ashes. Down US 11, 1:13. Remembering last night, down the Lee Highway, under the Milky Way, driving home from Meadowview to Glade, back from CW's where I bought the windmill, the Silvertone wind charger in 3 pieces. 1, the 6-foot rotor. 2, the 5-foot tower. 3, the round generator with the fin, like a tow-headed Martian with a neck stalk, her cyclops eye bound to the wheel. A bulb of wind flower, wave flower, in the back seat, where my daughter lay so many times, stretched asleep in the dark. She seemed so quiet, my Silvertone, charged with the wind of the future, von anderen Planeten. Her rigid mechanical black metal, a shell only, a husk. Otherworldly, like a visitant, yet fellow in the cosmos. I wondered, was it in the void between the stars that she'd evolved, this swollen eye, this bulbous brow stretched thin behind her, attenuating toward the fin-tail wind sensor, her close-wound copper wire coils and burnished copper brushes, not rigid but waiting, coiled to be released from her sleep on the hay. Free at last, God Almighty, free at last, after her lost generation in Sleepy Hollow, her 30 years with the heifers in CW's barn. She's ready to burn, to be awakened, turned by the wind, turning winter and rough weather from enemy to friend. There's a sleeping Jenny in my child's place, on the back seat where Eva lay, moaning on her way to the emergency room. Oh, she's glad I found a garden for her tiny wind plant, and a mountain to turn on, to turn into a wind tower, to whir and spin on, to turn my turntable under the ramos, to plunge tap roots under the miles down, down through my cabled rooms, under Thelonious, under the train, to sprinkle a DC tail light on a bright page of Twelfth Night, and down to the great mine batteries that store the sun, to fleet the time with my companions as they did in the golden world, to draw the storm into this eye of storm, this channeled stormlight and melody, this chambered whirlwind and pastoral. Super Bowl 114. 10 below, moonlight on mountainside, snow, long lines of shadow cast by the tall oaks bent to the curve of the mountain, into the creek bottom, concave, blue in the light of snow, in the moonlight prismatic, tiny crystals, porous, crisp, flakes sparkling, 10,000 gleams. You can feel the whole spectrum in darkness. I can almost hear the frost, the white atoms snap, crackle, bend, break. Like a fresh Super Bowl of Rice Krispies hollowed out under the cabin. Every branch creaking arthritical. Like living bones aging as I listen. The petrified joints and veins in the mountain of leaves. Scrape, snap, rustle, pop. 10 degrees below in the Arctic quietness. Below, in the void beneath all the scales, I hear one enormous crinkled oak leaf scraping a dead branch 50 yards below me. I hear the wind there, in the twigs, in the atoms, in the air, in nothing, in the wide soughing, not in the trees only, in the hollow ladled out, one brooding, whole breath, ancestral. I hear, here, and there, this, over and under the gusting cabin smoke, billowing densely, scudding far out, gray, blue, black, white, coughing up suddenly through the pipe, trailing out wisps and streamers, whirls thin curled, sparks, embers, dark smoke with light, blown from the roof, breathed through the bare trees from which it comes. Moment by moment poured back into the quiet basin, brimful of the spring, source of the music vibrant in all I hear. If I could record it, could bear to hold it, play it through by heart. But mine this monotone of mountain transposed to memory. Rehearse this sacred air, but dip and ladle deep, but let it breathe, inspire and rise, fall and expire, to the breath of the world under the melody. My Leontine recording the baton of Bernstein, grazing the crystals, the atoms, not budging an ion, disturbing, revealing nothing. Then I remembered my Cyclops Martian silver-tone wind charger, excavated from C.W.'s barn, with her one round eye on its fin tail outstretched behind me, decapitated from her tiny tower, where Eva lay in the back seat, with her leg in a splint, moaning down 81. Dismembered, wrapped in her copper coils like an intergalactic mummy, relic of an age gone by, or prophecy of one to come. Her heartbeat suspended, her vital signs arrested, the better part of her forgotten, the sundry parts of her divided, the poem of her apart, in oblivion, on ice, awaiting her time. Her shoulders brushed would shiver, nudged by the wind would tremble, vibrate, shudder, begin to circle, orbit slowly, revolve and spin, to spin and whirl, to whirl and tear about her axis, I, to spark the breeze, to breathe again, at 12 below, from this bone-rattling breeze, catch fire, solar, from the jet-black west wind, so long since red, since sundown. Juncos 1:15. On these snowbirds down here from the Arctic, sleepless in tears in the bleachers outside my window. 6 or so small somber puffballs plump my plum tree. Compact, portable little ovals, tear-shaped but for the beaks. Trim, round, beak-tipped bird buds ripen on the hickory, on the plum. Mercy, what fat little nibblers puff, nibble, and preen. But God, how they do squabble and peck at one another that-a-way, when they're not sitting, shivering at that runaway bird fiend, half-starved, fearful, blacker'n black cat of the Baskervilles. One deadpan, half a dozen fans, and thunder cloudlets, eye-buds blossoming on a branch. Stairs downstairs on a crumb, and on the creeper. 4-footed, fanged, clawed, furred, sharp-soft, quick-slow, stalking the silent snow, the silent one they do not know. But look what a feisty crew of stoic teardrops splashed down onto my pad again this morning, thawed by the hunger or the dream of bread. I've a question for somebody out there, among ye stormy roundlings that crowd my stage. What moves you so near me today, to dare my windows at dawn? Hunger or the dream? What drives the driven life? A Winter's Tale, 1:15. Overheard. A teenager looking up while bagging groceries. Great God Almighty, no telling what's going to break out of that big black cloud up yonder. Moonlight, thunderclaps, snow, tornadoes, missiles. No, son, there's no telling, for we do not know. We can only feel the weight in the air, the light darkening, the pressure falling on the barometer, in the blood. Child, this is the winter's tale. No one can tell. But listen, hark, over here. Eavesdrop, and let it go muttering on. Let it tell itself. Still Life, 1:15. After reading Celan's Stilleben. Davor das Fremde, des Gast du hier bist. At Beulah's yesterday, reading her eyes, I need to recapture the atmosphere. S saw my anger flashed out, a quick flash, no legacy. Under the surface we were together, laughing together and at each other, each at the other and the other's anger, and at the common anger in our mutual fund. A rare moment on both our accounts. But meanwhile, Beulah's trying to remember the new plaque, and at first she can't. Then, as it happens, she can. So that I seem to see it as it occurs to her, slowly, surfacing beneath consciousness. A new plaque come to me when I was sick, but I forgot it. She lowers her head and shakes it as she tries to remember. She raises her head again, and, as if by accident, finds me in her line of sight and locks me in it. I see nothing in her eyes. Then slowly I see her eyes, still in my line of sight, begin to see something interior to them, which has nothing to do with me. I watch something in sight, shut in, being released. Slowly the awareness happens, separating like a dream from sleep, like a diver beneath the eyelids, surfacing from the floor of the sea, with both hands reaching upward, breaking the surface slowly, opening, peeling it back. Before you, the stranger whose guest you are here. Igloo, 1:15, 10 p.m. But maybe it's not the snow clouds or the thunder clouds, but the whole low-pressure system, the very lowering sky, sweeps this mountain above one quivering cabin. Then down the ladders from upstairs that leaves this feeling here, where I cannot tell. But let the hailstones bounce off, Lord, and the lightning bolts shock treatments. Let the ice burn and the hail heal, and the snow settle over the ceiling up there, into that nail hole, to make me an igloo, to insulate and hibernate and barricade me in with some moonshine sweeter than sunjohns, icebound in art's bateau, with the blubber of flow and the unknown ones I feed on and light my lamps by, when I can't tell what's happening here, until I can. On Blake's Nobo Daddy, 1:18. Well, he's just a good God, of a good many good godly folks, which they get to sit right behind them in the pew to tilt him over just right when the right time comes, and over 'em, way over 'em, to give 'em the right clout, leverage, and wallop when they swing the good old moral maul down. Oh, pity the poor little chips off the old block busters. Spleen of the solitary, unattached male, 1:20. Thinking about Jackie H., coal miner's son, all elbows, rough, crude, profane, a John Birch man you can hear whisper 3 fields away. Yet neighbor-wise, shrewd, skillful, responsive, precise, helped Rob and Daisy make it through their last years. And other folks on the creek, getting up at 5, stumbling around the hill to feed Jack's steers. Then again after dark, year after year, between 10-hour shifts in West Virginia, 80 miles over the mountains. Done it for nothing, he said. Then Saturday night, one of the heifers calved. Dogs tore it up, dragged it downhill covered with mother blood. Jackie shooed 'em off, too late to save it. Then, doubtfully, called the dog warden when Jack begged him to. So warden arrives, goes up and down the creek, giving out fines, apologizing that Jackie sent her. Now Jack's all sweet innocence. Got nothing to do with it, of course. So Jackie's left, shunned by both sides as he sees it, holding his bag, which is Jack's. Old Jack's back in his shack, a-hugging his knees, holding himself faced, scared they'll burn him out. Not to let go of the old ways, tried and true, every man's hut his fortress. Thus we keep rounding the days, planing the ragged twilights, fleecing and feeding, finishing the fences, currying the current droves and driving them on, driven with them and letting them go, as we go with them, with the flow. As I climb the low mountain into the open, into the evening, high on its pebbly spine I hear the yapping of the chained guard dogs around 100 kitchens, quoting their property rights, encircling domestic circles, snarling with fortress fear, innocent of the fearful wonder of creation, wide sown, flung far in everyone. Spleen, too, of the solitary, etc. 120. Crouching in thickets, humping in alleys, deep down in the hollers, too deep in the privates, censored and rated, verboten, top secret, under wraps in wool blankets, electric or sandwich, too deep at the least, down in goose down, knitted at the waist and knotted at the head too. Oh, but I envy you, you blankety-blank couples, and more couples, blankety-blank, exclamation point. Spleen 3. What cast its spell over us? What swore us to secrecy, herded us into the silence and corralled us with it? What spread this shroud over us, this funeral cloak, this black cloud cover, this low-pressure system, this appalling S1 tent cover, Christo wrapping, collapsing on the lungs, on the sucked-in rib cage, arrhythmic? What dampens the voices and every synapse, muffles a question, clogs up the conduits? What is this static jams the signals of joy? What jangling little personal piggy bank hides every cent of spendthrift impulse, drops it in? What hypnotized us in the beginning? God, but this silence weighs 20 tons. It's a pressure on every square inch of body surface. I feel like I'm being stoned to death by this silence, zoned in to the centers of memory, under the surface, stoned by little stones of grim self-closure and silence. Stone by little stone, they're zeroing in on the powers, to dream, to remember, to circulate what is in us, not yet out, in us. It's the silence, deafens. People say nothing, and then they say nothing, and then they say it some more. God, but the pressure on the lungs collapsing, on the cavity where the heart is. I cannot breathe. Romero, 1:21. Reading, the sun also rises. Reading in earnest. Romero, his laureate of matadors, is in the ring. It's late in the afternoon. The sun is setting. And we begin to realize that he will die. It's one of the beauties of the book that he survives, that death hangs over him, but that he doesn't have to die, to hold us in its shadow as the night approaches. Romero manages to keep the bull in front of Brett's seat most of the time, so in a sense, he's fighting for her. Yet there's another sense which complicates his aims and extends their reach. Never once did he look up. He made it stronger that way, and did it for himself too, as well as for her. Because he did not look up to ask if it pleased, he did it all for himself inside. And it strengthened him, and yet he did it for her too. Because he did not do it for her at any loss to himself. He gained by it all through the afternoon. Surely he is speaking to himself. Surely he is speaking of himself. Surely he is hoping we'll overhear. My life is the afternoon. My work is the Cour de Taureau. And you, my reader, are her. The labors of battle absorbed me, and I am here. I'll never look over my shoulder, but I hope you are there. Eva's swing, sent to her with her photo, age 11, high over the Jemison Gap. 1:21. Hi, darling. Gerald's caught you at just the right moment, as far out as that swing will ever take you. Your head flung all the way back, your hair falling behind you. You're poised above the ravine at the peak of the pendulum. You gave yourself to the moment, so it was given to you. Oh, accept it. The burden of the transport, the burden of the first fear overcome, the burden of living it out, of feeding and fusing it with your life force, all your life long. Self, 1:22. Strange to gather the little years, like Philo's herbs native here, poking their winter green heads up from the creek bank in the bottom, from where the corn patch was at the turn of the century. With the sang and the sassafras, the bloodroot and trillium. Time, a better medicine, more healing than laughter. Oblivion, the dread, also balm. Time, the destroyer, preserver, or barber, doctor. Skims the scalp and trims it a little closer, shaves the fuzzy memory of soul and body, sweetens the wounds of time with the salves of time passing. Time the surgeon, time the healer, yes. Time the holy afternoon, en route toward the dark, still not yet there. Here then, disheveled in the rough, unmown in this balmy now, I lay my head in the wind-blown hair of the grass. I too am a part of everything, with everything, en route, apart and apart. Let me be patient, Dr. Death. Driving with Kay over the Chattahoochee, 1:29. Remembering what it is about certain people. It's not any one great moment of crisis that reveals it, but their continuity as a being, which is better revealed in the small moments. We're riding in the car, the rain is coming down, and she is talking. The talk is generous, the disposition of herself toward me and all the rest. The rain and the road, looking into it all with circumspection, with a dispersion of cautions, focused on the center line and on something also before us, minute and specific, which she ponders with sustained attention, akin to the state of possession in which she paints, for no other reason, devotedly, so that I'm never quite unaware of the tiny card folded in her inner wallet, which returns to the public domain, her eyes, her kidneys, her liver, her brain, and her heart. There is a river beneath us, and we move above the river, winding back and forth, invisibly, toward the sea, toward all our seeing, stretching beyond the opacity, the rain, the clouded glass, the wipers moving rhythmically, the cone of light on the dark road. No deposit, no return. 128. Pasted under photo of my children, their soft, warm faces in shadow, in the glare of the blue dart windshield barnacled with ice 7 years ago. Torn off a 7-Up carton last night from Piggly Wiggly. No deposit, no return. But what have I given? Now I can't see my children enough, can't find their eyes for the shadow, for the glare of a 12-year winter, the power cut off, the lines down, the bridges iced over, the roads closed, over the mountains. When we were cut off, when I cut her off, when their mother reached down with the cutters and severed the conductors, when I no longer reached through them to her. God, what have I given? No deposit, no return. Post-Apollo, 1:30. Strange how I came to build this cabin, the summer they went up in space. My cabin years post-Apollo, yes. The dust powdery around Armstrong's feet, dry, lifeless, devoid of even a microbe. Then it was coming home, on the way back, to color, breath, the ambience of earth, distinction. Our lonely, soft surrounded by all the void, visible in the dust, powdery around the boots. Seeing it whole, cut off, damp, delicate as an eggshell, alone, all one, like a single eye, a child's eye open from the blue-green life. Priceless, most secret, yet most open, hiding nothing, all I. To see it eye to eye, to meet it with mine, face to face, our blue one, before too late. 6 a.m. As I write this, my DC tail light dimming, contracted to a small circle here. Yet still the spell is cast, the power holds. I enter into the ring again of spellbound enchantment. Summer deepened through winter duress, prolonged, continuing. The trains so long shunted leave the siding again, pass through our valley of South Dream, and over the river. Cry joy, the bridge is opened. Strange day for it, 7 a.m., 30-mile-per-hour wind, gray dawn, overcast, 5 below, dead battery, no light, every door closed but Beulah's, but the woods, the sky, still open, the earth, still partly open, partly hidden, waiting for thaw. Let something in me be waiting, bowed with the snowbound world. Let its burden be mine, and my prayer, conspiring with it how to load and bless these words, these gifts I've taken, that blessed me with thought, with thanks, to send them on. In my father's house, 2:2. Dream last night. Fire in my father's house, started by my wood stove. Chimney fire that spewed up flame and ash high into the air and laid down black debris all over town, on every side. Dad going out with me, poking the clinkers, touring our yard, which was also the college grounds. But he wasn't bothered, only, we'll rake it up in the morning, it's okay. Then he was inside by the hearth, and I on the threshold, and he was glad to see me there, and welcomed me as no one else ever could. The light buried so deep in his face that it would never go out, smoldering in the smile and radiating in wave on wave of warmth, kindling, focused in the eyes toward mine. I wonder on waking how often such mercy happened to me. What is more real, the dream or the life the dream condenses? One drop of essence is all I want, to pass through the nightmare whole. One freely given, like the very life, and so received. It is why I am here. But what a burden. What a release it is. But what a burden. What a burden to say, what have I given? 2, 3. But God, it's good to be still picking up the kindling from that face, and the signals of that gentleman on my antennae, reaching up through the roof and gathering in the wind, the firewood and the woodwind, ice water and light, the light of the smile of the sun and of the sun, in thought and in thanks. King's Cross Station, 2-4. The lamps are going out one by one all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. Lord Grey, August 1914. 1978, King's Cross Station. Down along cars, still dark outside. Down a long platform, toward grey air at end of platform. A small red light on locomotive like a cigarette tip. A dull fluorescence along platform. Scrapings of muffled footsteps on granular concrete. A low drone, pervasive, diminished. The lights, yes, one by one, going, gone, as I walk, into grey morning in skylight, dim tunnel of fog at the end, past red tip, white steam, through the cathedral tall station, grey like a Monet in charcoal, a cartoon of the Belle Epoque, drained of the spectrum, into my fearful, tedious grey century in transit. Steam, steady hiss in grey mist, whistling valves, smoking cylinders under cars. Walk over to edge of platform, peer down, between sleepers, my head in fog, in steam and hiss, in damp grey cloud where coupling is. Intercity sleeper, look up through glass, white beds rumpled, left before dawn, disordered and early. I pick my way through debris on platform, scaffolding. A sign at last. A rock to stand on for the next 5 years. British savings bonds. Yes, if we can just make it 5 years more, maybe only the rocks will. But now I'm near the end of the train of locked cars, reading in a glass box on the dim wall. A blur of tiny numbers and minute names, lit up by a soft light from within. I peer down the columns. Aberdeen, Boston, Cleethorpes, Drim, Dunbar, Dundee, Durham, Edinburgh, Heybrow, Halifax, Harrogate, Hull, Market Raisin, Morpeth, New Pudsey, Thirsk, Sunderland, 2745 SX10689, the night capitals, Drim, Sunderland, the night capitals. Through the glass doors, the waiting room, into King's Cross bookstalls, thumbing volumes on tables, essays on Nabokov, flipping through middle. Quote, and the darkness inside which he moves becomes the darkness of a cinema. Strange here to find my friend's voice and his matchless attention. Here at the end of the long trains where they can go no farther, in the heart of the city. From Morpeth and from Thirsk, from Harrogate and from Hull, from Sunderland and from Drim, the night capitals, through the darkness, into the words, the silence. Now I remember, years ago, walking by a river in December rain, bare bulbs swinging above the stalls, leaping through stack on stack, bemused by the titles. Absalom, Absalom, the four-gated city, the divided self, harmonium, the waves, native sun. The heart is a lonely hunter. Then carrying them home with me, on the station, toward midnight, up teetering flights to my stand, one tiny chamber in shape of a wedge squeezed under the roof, with nothing but a door and a window, a bed and a light bulb, a change of underwear and a box of papers, with nowhere to go but in. The phrases lit up my loneliness like a meteor shower, igniting as they hit the air I breathed and burning inward, into plantations of light, bulbs rooted and glimmering, tapping into the dark banks, sprouting from the floors beneath, and the echoes entwined in my head. When I awoke, interrogation 2:5. And again, Dr. Friendly, our patient DA. What'd you do it for then, Jack? To find a work that is a way, an itinerary? In this sense, for its own sake? To put my lips to the fountain at the top of my allotted hill, for the joy of it? Yes, but even that can't be sustained. The highest of the highs becomes a burden when not passed on. To share the joy of it then, sooner or later, yes. The connections, yes. To return them, to resupply your long trains that pass into the desert, yes. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't have told you. To believe in something, yes. When there are so few, when there is so little, yes. Because there's danger, because there's risk, yes. To believe in the connections, to believe in the words, to believe in your strangers, yes. Is this all? No. Is this most of it? No. What is it then, the rest of it? I do not know. Rose and Isabel 2:8. Long talk with Beulah on the potwork. Hers, Rose's. Rose working on Beulah's black, sanding and sanding. Rose's only child, Isabel. Her last rhymed poems, her canvases, her commune, her peace marches, bell on the threshold. Between the tracks over the Holston, halfway over, bridge trembles. Locomotive thunders onto trestle. Bell screams, kneels, hangs free, gripping a tie, tires, slips, lets go, and is gone. Death bolting out of nowhere, like the lightning in the blue summer sky. Rose's life, Red's life, go with her, or stop, suspended, going through the motions. Rose puttering about the house, still hanging from the bridge, still tiring, slipping, falling free, nothing solid beneath her. So after a while she takes up pottery, and for years life ebbs or spirals downward, repeating the motions, turning the motor on, the wheel spins, the damp, shiny cone in her hands, hollow, but slick, supple, but growing, rising, turning upon itself, whole. And so it trickles back a little. Through the potwork she feels the life begin to trickle back into the clay, I suppose. I've always felt Rose sensed something out there, trying to come back, or to remain, hang on, hold on, or only hoped that the beloved has two lives, one of which is in the lover, that the clay which comes to life in her hands and passes through the fire for her is the self-same clay of the earth in which Isabel is buried, and that guided by the hands on the wheel emerging between the legs, something might issue out of the clay again. But I know what you're thinking, that these are half-truths at best, that death is the major fact here, and irrevocable. But so is life, Beulah. So she must go on fighting against the death, keeping it down with her work, so that what of Belle has been left her will go with her. Swish, 210, Durham, 1960, Bristol, 1949. On writing my first notebook on Inglewood Avenue, between the high-pressure classes, Vico and Mommsen, Pragmatism and Positivism, the Origins of Totalitarianism. Just sitting at Mrs. Glimp's, above the street, listening, with the Royal Portable on my knees, at the juncture of light. Po' boy off on a railroad track, in June a-looking for a long locomotive, just letting the keys tap, tap, not knowing I was writing, enjoying April, finding them years later in an old notebook, nothing heavy about them, just a happiness, knowing then I must write in the dark, in the not knowing. It's like going out behind the house with the light on a soft June night between seasons, and hitting 3 straight from the bass line, nobody looking. The sometime only touch, buried in the steaming, screaming December gem, in the rank lockers of the body. Remembered through the thick light, hushed, spring evening air all heavy with pollen, from the smell of dew on the new-mown church lawn Sunday downtown, coming out of sermon and shadow into hot sun, hard glare, out of the smell of wax in the vestry, mothballs in choir robes, shampoo in her hair, and her monthly strangeness. Out of an old hymn, out of the whole day, including dawn, out of the holy day into the twilight, gathering all day in my fingertips, in the feeling across distance of the net. Swish goes the net. Swish goes a word, goes a rhyme. Swish goes a space, goes a rhythm. On the keys, tap, tap. Swish, swish. 21 years and a winter, and all the spring evening air about them, funneled through the keys. Tap, tap. Spleen 4, chug, 2:11. Thinking about a book I liked, said I liked, and then didn't, said I didn't, and then did, even more. Well, doggone, what makes me say these things and do 'em? But maybe I'm learning a little how mixed up I am, how many-stranded the bloodlines in my descent. Maybe I'm learning. Maybe I haven't stopped learning. Maybe. But I wonder what a curious mixed breed of motives fathers my hand, mothers my mind here. But God, the good people, keep 'em safe, Lord, but save us from 'em. Save us, Lord, from conversion, wholesale in the billowing tents of luminous flesh, en masse into barnacled mollusks, nodding inanities over counter and desktop. Save a delightful word, Lord. Save the delight in the word that we must keep or perish. Diminished, deadened, sapped by the vitas, comfort us not with common quiescence into submission to the reproductive faculties and dukedoms. Pledge us not, Lord, to the best-paid play-by-play accounts of Pilomates, texts, study guides, colleagues, and the NFL sleepward. Prevent us yet from abandon of the early fervor. Yet save us a scrap or two of your princely summons and pauper's appeal. Then let us not go any further into all this other business, full rights of reproduction, good reprints and good repute, real sure-enough copies, time times Xerox equals A.B. Dick, plus or minus Sharp equals cannon fodder, good copies, copies right good copyrights, but enough. Ganook, James. But God Almighty, the spring comes and covers up. Bury 'em, Lord, in the uncopyrighted bloom. Daffodils a-pushin' at the cabin, little engines that could, and my blanket's on fire. Wham! The smoke's a-blossoming black at my window, and she almost burns down. A huffin' and a puffin' and a puffin' and a huffin', almost but not quite, almost but not yet, almost but almost, not quite, Lord, yet. Chug a chug a chug a chug a chug a chug a chug. Cross the page one more time, fellers. But they keep on a-pushin' and a-pushin' and a-pushin'. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Up the hill, happily. Spring must be a-comin' in, a-comin' in, a-comin' in. Hurry up, April, honey, and come on around, 'cause baby, we might not be here when you get back. Backlight, 212. Red on a battery. Caution, do not short circuit. May cause burns. Raise a subject, any subject, with Beulah. The room begins to crackle, charged with its native voltages from currents grounded here and in her. I mentioned yesterday my battery wires shorting, my bed on fire. Beulah studies, contemplating batteries. 3 memories surface of lightning rippling and glowing on the backs of horses, playing over the huge pylons across the road on a mild day, no storm in the air, and hitting a barn, incinerating a neighbor. They left the horses below and climbed up into the loft, thunderbolts raking all around. They were settin' side by side talking, 3 of 'em, Will in the middle, cursing God. Damn, God damn, damn, God damn, outside, and said, be careful, Will, slow down, God's a-watchin'. And they just laughed, all 3 of 'em. Will doubled over. Don't tempt him, Will. And they laughed, and Will kept on. God damn, huh? God damn, God be goddamn for putting me here, huh? And the next thing he knowed, here it come, and Will was gone. That's the way it was, and that's the way it had to be, I reckon, for little Will, and all his discomforts. Yep, all his troubles were over, for what was left of him, because between them there was nothing but this wadded up little black lump, wafer-like, a thin crisp, a small. No, says Sadie, the heart can't burn, Mama. It's got too much blood in it. I don't know about that, Beulah says, but there was nobody left in the middle on the board between them. Between Silas with his laugh cut off and his grin wiped clean from his face, and Bud out cold. Nothing but this thing, pancake-like, sagging in the middle, charcoal red, where the heart was. That's all that was left of Will, and his goddamn. Beulah looks at me, and I feel the current from that flash, still with its lofty power to sear, because she sees it completely, even as she holds it back, staring balefully inward, remote and abstracted, recessed with it, because her voice convinces, her skin grows leathery and withered, the creases etched in, her pupils contract until I see them, until I see them seeing it, this thing from before. Before her, parched, smoldering somewhere between us. This horrible proof, this lump, this crisp, part human crepe, fried down to a shapeless wad of unchastened flesh, too bloody wet to burn, too proud to repent, little Willie's defiant heart, cooking down slowly, still beating as in a skillet of cast iron. Bud wasn't burnt too bad, but he never knowed what happened. He woke up 3 days later in the hospital. That's when he got to studying. Yep, got to studying. Whenever it come up a storm, you'd see him a-settin', hunched over in that old Chevy pickup in front of the Piggly Wiggly. Even when the rain slacked off and the sun come out, he'd still be there. Poor old Bud. He was never the same after that. Oh, but he had a need. Bud had a need. I come him to beat up my sister. He'd beat her till she cried for mercy. Then he'd beat her some more, till there was nothing to beat on but what he'd beat on before. Them puckered up scabs on her back that looked like red lips. Little Lorne. He crippled her up for good before he was done. Jack, you ever brushed your hair in the dark and seen the sparks in the mirror? Have you ever noticed this backlight come a-shimmering on the rumps of draft horses, worked up into a sweat in a damp field, overcast, with the clouds low around? You don't even see it, this lightning that's all around. Only this backlight from behind them, playing over them like from behind those towers. Even as she raises her hand toward the window, she looks back at me from all that is in it. The pylons, the rumps, Lorna's sores, the wad of flesh. Into the room, into my eyes, communicating the imminence of spite, of an impending malice, of an energy vengeful and invisible abroad in the world, which might visit me even tonight, as it did poor Will, to short my battery cables and erase me also. I follow her hand through the window, past the cattle scales, toward where the huge squads of steel file out under arms, marching up Major Tate's pasture where he hung the slave, pylon on pylon, over the Holston, and on, over the Blue Ridge, toward Boone, through the Appalachians, continuing like history. It's all in this backlight, says Beulah. Raising one wrinkled hand, she traces a curve, oscillating, an outline as of a body. Her fingers waver, rippling. The air of the room solidifies, is sculpted, so that I see it, whatever it is, as stored there, reserved, as withheld, hidden also, in her eyes reflecting, as they absorb that power in memory, in the luminous outline of a dark body, muscles rippling, flanks trembling with natural fear and raw force, charged with the current it gathers in, backlit with the voltage in its silhouette, and in the air, the field, held in, concealed before the storm, the fire, life's end. Now, you better cut off those batteries before you go to sleep.